Folks, welcome everyone to today's session. Welcome to the launch of Outscape's Sustainable Trails Development Guide. We are so beyond pleased and proud to be presenting this guide to you today. For those of you who I've not met before, my name is Fiona Millen and I work in the place shaping team, and I'll be presenting to you today. Before we do get really into the session today, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank everyone who was involved in the development of this guide. Firstly, thanks to Sport NI and NIEA for funding the guide. And for your eternal patience, because anyone who has produced a guide like this knows it's very hard to know when to just press stop editing. To the place shaping team in Outscape, this guide was very much a collaborative and team effort, so thank you to them. Thank you to everyone whose advice that we sought and who openly shared information and really honed our understanding on some of the topics. So that is Pete Lang from Wacky Trails, John Ireland from Forestry and Land Scotland, Dave Liddy, Natural Resource Wales, and Joanne Mason from Forestry England. And finally, thank you to everyone who's joined the call this morning. We're really humbled by the number of people who's registered. As I say, we had about 100 people registered. We're up to a really good number there on the call now. People from across Northern Ireland, Ireland and GB representing various organisations. So it's really, really encouraging and makes us very happy to see the guide is reaching far already. So I hope you have a nice cup of tea or coffee sitting in front of you, you're settled in and you enjoy the session today. Before we get into the session, I just want to do a quick bit of housekeeping. I'm sure you'll be familiar with this now in webinars. During the presentation, keep your mic and camera off. That helps with bandwidth, especially when we have a lot of people on the call. We're recording this launch and the video will be available, sent directly to participants, but also available on our Outscape website after. So if you don't want to appear on screen at any stage, just keep your camera off for the entire duration. The chat function is there. I'd encourage you to use it. Pop in your questions, your feedback and your thoughts. We will have a question and answer session at the end, so we can take questions from the chat box, or feel free just to keep them in your mind and use your virtual hand when the time comes. And just a quick spoiler alert, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts and hear from you on ideas or what you might like to see in a future training programme, what you'd like to see included on sustainable trails and sustainable trail development. What are your training needs and the training needs of your colleagues? So please bear that in mind as we move through the presentation today. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. So without further ado, I'll get started. So I want to cover with you 5 topics today. First being, what is a sustainable trail? I think you could talk about this alone for an hour, but for the purposes of today, I've just kept it really simple to set the context and tone for the rest of the presentation. I want to tell you about the guide, why we developed it, who it's for and what's covered. I want to take you through the guide itself and really focus in on some of the key information and new guidance. Tell you about the upcoming training programme that we are developing, and then finish off with some questions before wrapping up by about 12 o'clock. Okay, so what is a sustainable trail? Look, put really simply, our guide explains that a sustainable trail is the right trail in the right place for the right user. But what does this mean? This means that sustainable trails are carefully planned, designed, carefully built and managed and maintained to number 1, integrate and fit and be appropriate to their environment. Number 2, fulfil the needs and expectations of their intended users. And 3, enhance and bring benefits to the environment, the economy and the society in which they are placed. This artist's impression here that you see on screen attempts to convey that, just how trails are designed and built in different environments to suit different users. But what does that look like in real life? Sustainable trails are appropriate to their setting. They are designed and they're built to be appropriate to blend with the landscape in which they are located and be blend with that landscape's defining characteristics. They work with, or in some cases enhance, the natural functioning and processes of the landscape they're in, and they should protect habitats and nature. After all, landscape and nature connection are one of the main reasons people seek access to the outdoors. And sustainable trails work with land use and management practices. They shouldn't interrupt, impinge, or interfere with the functioning, the use, and the management of that land. Sustainable trails are not no maintenance. Every trail carries a level of maintenance, but sustainable trails have a level of maintenance that is identified from the beginning, accounted for from the start, and is sustainable to that land manager. And sustainable trails meet the needs and expectations of intended users, and different users will want and actively seek out trail experiences with varying levels of accessibility, challenge, remoteness, and risk, etc. But sustainable trails meet these needs and expectations in a way that is compatible with the landscape's location and its functions. Sustainable trails communicate the risk, the experience, the accessibility, and other characteristics so clearly that people can make their own decision about whether a trail is right for them or not without any nasty surprises. And finally, sustainable trails are good for society and they're good for the economy. They can connect communities to each other and connect people with their local heritage. They can provide options for local walking clubs, helping to reduce loneliness and improve mental health and physical well-being. And they themselves can be tourist attractions or part of the tourism offering in iconic locations. So in conclusion, sustainable trails add value to the environment, to the society, and to the economy. This is very much the heart of section 1 of our guide, but a bit more about that later. Okay, so I'm going to take 5 minutes now to tell you about the guide, about why it was developed, who it's for, and what it covers. Our guide is really intended for practitioners and professionals involved in the development, management and maintenance of trails, including public and statutory bodies, councils, third sector organisations, trail consultants, trail builders, landowners, community groups and clubs. A broad spectrum covering all staffing levels and types of roles and responsibilities. To some of you, the full guide may be relevant. To others, you may just want to cherry pick the sections that are. But regardless, by publishing this guide, it is our hope that it will aid trail developers and managers in their work, raise awareness of the process and the resources required to develop sustainable trails, promote consistency, raise the overall quality and standard of trails being developed, and lastly, result in more sustainable trails being developed. So why develop this guide? It is developed by Outscape. Our guide is based on the combined knowledge, experience and expertise of staff who have worked in this field for nearly 20 years. This guide replaces the 2013 guide that was the Principles and Standards for Trail Development in Northern Ireland. And this guide at the time was ahead of its time. It was and still is the only guidance in Northern Ireland that relates to trail development. But 12 years on, processes have changed. Attitudes towards the outdoors and approaches to trail development have evolved and knowledge has advanced. Our new guide reflects all of this and contains not just updated information, but also new guidance that's been developed in-house by ourselves. With the new guidance, however, we haven't just reinvented the wheel. We've worked really hard to ensure that our new guidance complements and aligns with existing leading guidance and standards that we at Outscape ourselves use and follow. And in this guide, we advise others to do so too. By doing so, we'll all be moving towards a consistent approach. So what I'm sharing with you now is Outscape's very own Trail Development Bible, our complete handbook containing the exact trail development process that we ourselves follow, the approaches that we take, the best practice that we lean on, and the principles and standards of sustainability, accessibility and quality that we strive for every project that we are involved in or work on. What trails does it apply to? Our guide has been specifically written to apply to off-road trails, walk trails and multi-use trails in lowland environments. We do not cover with this guide cycle trails that includes mountain bike trails, single-use equestrian trails, greenways or upland trails. Listen, there's very good reasons for that. It's either we don't need to because guidance already exists for those other types of trails, or a specialist approach is required. For example, equestrian trails, cycle trails and greenways, there is really well established, accepted specifications and guidance out there. We use this guidance ourselves and recommend others to do the same in this guide. Upland trails above 300 metres require a specialist approach and expertise, and Outscape in this guide recognises that and refers to other guidance on that. Okay, now to our guide and the guide itself. Our guide is split into 6 topic-specific sections. Section 1 covers the principles. It explains what a sustainable trail is and the fundamental 10 principles underpinning the trail development process. Section 2 covers the process of trail development. It explains 8 stages of trail development in detail, right from the idea of a trail through to the ongoing management and maintenance. Section 3, trail grading, explains why and how to grade trails, how to communicate grade to users, and we present a new trail grade system for both walk and multi-use trails. Section 4 is all about trail construction guidelines and approaches. In this, we explain the steps involved in building a trail, the principles and good practice approaches, and the techniques that are essential to the design and construction of high quality, sustainable trails in different types of environments. Section 5 is all about visitor monitoring. Here we reviewed the application, advantages and disadvantages of the most popular visitor counters currently in use. And Section 6 is the last section. It's called Costing a Project. And using worked examples in this section, we explain how cost is a critical consideration at all stages of development process, often being the deciding factor in whether a trail is delivered or not. Now, I'll go through each of these in turn, but rather than narrate what's in the guide, you can do that. I'll just focus on key information and pieces of new guidance. So the principles of sustainable trail development, section 1, really sets the foundation for the rest of the guide. It sets out and explains 10 principles, some of which I've touched on in the introduction of what a sustainable trail is. These principles are really the fundamentals that apply to all stages of the trail development process and should be considered throughout by a trail developer. And as you can see here, they include principles such as protecting and enhancing biodiversity, managing risk, balancing cost and benefit, and accessibility and inclusion. In essence, a sustainable trail is environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable. And it's these principles here that we've identified serve as the criteria or indicators, for want of another word, of sustainability for those who are planning, designing, building, and managing trails. So moving on to section 2, the trail development process. With this guide, we are now sharing with you our very own proven approach to developing a sustainable trail. We recommend 8 stages to develop a sustainable trail, and our guide goes into every single one of these stages, as well as the processes that are continuous across all 8 stages, such as planning and funding and seeking permissions and approvals. Some of the information in this section relates specifically to Northern Ireland, like the planning process and procurement. However, the approach in general and the majority of the guidance here applies regardless of region. And today I just want to pick up on the first 2 stages and explain what they are, as they've been a more recent change or adoption in our approach. So what is scoping and feasibility, and what's the difference? Scoping is really the first stage in the trail development process, and it considers briefly, so i.e. a few days, at a high level, i.e. desk research, whether an initial trail idea warrants further time, financial investment, and a full feasibility assessment. It is essentially a screening exercise. And the purpose of scoping is to demonstrate, 1, there's a need or not for the trail, and 2, there either are or aren't major obvious constraints that are likely to affect a viable trail from being developed. Constraints are usually environmental, engineering, or cost related, and trails either pass or fail scoping. If a trail passes scoping, it moves to stage 2. Feasibility then follows on and is a more thorough and critical assessment of a site or a trail against 8 feasibility factors. The conclusion, though, is more than what it is at scoping. It's a definitive evidence-based judgment that a trail is either feasible or not, and that's usually accompanied by a likely trail route and order of magnitude costs. So essentially the difference between scoping and feasibility is the amount of time and the level of detail that is put in. But completing the scoping at the start avoids wasting resource on work that may not be required or on a trail that may not turn out to be feasible, which would have otherwise been identified at the scoping stage. In terms of process, I want to highlight two themes that are prevalent in this guide, deliberately so because they are strong influences in our own trail development approach. That is the user and the environment. Both of these things are continuous anchors throughout the trail development process, and we constantly question, are we meeting the needs and expectations of users? Are we creating or taking opportunities to protect and enhance the environment and biodiversity? The guide today contains advice and steps for how to put the user and the environment at the centre of decision making, and actually we'll soon be publishing another piece of supplementary advice dedicated to guidance on specifically how to integrate biodiversity into trail projects. That will be coming soon and goes hand in hand with this guide. And finally, in section 2, the trail development process, what I think is one of the most valuable players in this guide is this table that you see on screen here. This shows the trail development process presented like the REBA plan of work, and it's aligned to be deliberately so. It defines the start and end points of each stage, including the process, outputs, and who's involved. And it also includes what I mentioned earlier, those continuous processes that occur throughout all stages, like planning, funding, and seeking permissions and approvals. So, section 3, trail grading. This section contains specifications for developing new walk and multi-use trails. It contains grading advice for existing trails, and it contains guidance on how to effectively communicate grade to users. This diagram that you can see here shows the suite of off-road recreational trail types that typically exist. Those in the gold box are multi-use trails and single-use walk trails, the ones that our guide has been written to apply to. On the left-hand side, you can see this includes an all-ability or multi-access specification, and this specification aligns with leading guidance on accessible trails. Now here, I just want to simply draw your attention to two things. First is under multi-use. Beyond moderate difficulty in the multi-use category, trails inherently become single-use according to the different activities. Also, the names, the symbols, and the colours, these are all the same as what's used by Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. And again, in an effort to be consistent, we've adopted the same. One of the key new pieces of guidance that we've developed with this guide is a grading system for multi-use trails and separately for walk trails. This table contains the specifications for each grade and can be used by developers of new trails, but also managers who wish to grade existing trails. Grade essentially means difficulty, and these criteria on the left-hand side are the characteristics that determine difficulty. Again, these criteria are not new, they're used across the world to define difficulty for different trail types, so we haven't invented anything new here. And again, following a consistent approach. And this is the same type of table, but for walk trails specifically. Okay, moving on to section 4, which specifically deals with construction guidelines and approaches. Now, section 4 is a comprehensive section. It contains information in the form of principles, specification, techniques, drawings, and examples of best practice. It's a fabulous section, but really comprehensive. It's not intended to be a set of IKEA instructions teaching you how to build a trail step by step, but rather, by providing information in this section, what we intend to do is raise awareness of the principles, approaches, and good practice used to design and build high quality, sustainable trails. What we also intend to do by providing the information is help designers and builders understand the expectations of clients regarding sustainability and quality. And we also want to help trail developers understand what the characteristics and signs of a sustainable trail are and what they should A, be asking for during procurement, and B, checking for during the construction phase. Guidance and information in section 4 is presented in the same order of steps that you would build a trail. That's how the information is laid out from part 1, site preparation, marking out a trail line, to part 3, trail completion, adding in your furniture and your signage before handover. Part 2 might appear daunting, but essentially it is stating that when your design choices and construction approach, when you're making those are dictated by the environment in which you're working in. So in that middle box there, you will see trail structure, approaches in mineral soils, non-mineral soils, and bridges. Essentially, that's how we've categorised it. So non-mineral soil being peat and wetland areas, mineral soil being everything else, rock, sand, gravel, clay, etc. And the third category of trail surface being bridges, and information is provided separately on that. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an introduction when it comes to that section. And this slide just gives you a flavour of the type of information that's provided. So explanations and theories are supported with sketches, tables and photographs to really aid your understanding. And there is a particularly excellent summary of 11 different trail surfaces, or wearing courses as they're referred to, comparing the suitability, cost and maintenance of each. To use the term again, one of the most valuable players in section 4 is the section on managing water. I think we all know that managing water is critical to sustainable design and construction. This section explains why that is so. It explains the principles and the approaches, because managing water before it gets to your trail, when it is on your trail, and after it has left your trail determines not just how sustainable your trail is, but how much maintenance it will require long term. And last but not least, part 3, trail completion within section 4. We've provided guidance on furniture and signage. For each of these topics, we cover the types of hardware that you can use, the purpose of signs and furniture, and the design considerations such as material choice, visual impact, accessibility, durability, and positioning. And as you can see, this is accompanied by lots of really good visual examples. And section 5, visitor monitoring. Monitoring usage is important because the information gathered can help land and trail managers understand how their trail or trails are used, thus helping them make informed decisions about future management and development. In section 5, we've reviewed the application, the advantages and the disadvantages of the most popular visitor counters that are currently in use, and give you information, everything that you'd need to help you make an informed decision about how to monitor usage of a trail depending on why you want to do it. We also have a short section at the end on mobile data monitoring, which is an emerging method of visitor monitoring, and we've analysed location data from smartphones to tell you about visitor trends and patterns. And lastly, section 6. Section 6 is all about costing and encompasses the cost of your entire project from the start to finish, and includes professional and capital costs. Section 6 really drives home how costing is a continuous exercise throughout the trail development process, how it is a critical deciding factor in trail projects, particularly nowadays, and how costing for maintenance and management should be accounted for from the very beginning and outset of your project. Here on screen we have a matrix that comes from section 6 and shows the magnitude of cost associated with each stage of the trail development process according to how developed a site is. It also contains 2 very good worked examples of costing a project, one at the start and one at the end. And the guide is full of tables and tools like this that can be lifted and used in your own work. So we hope you find these really useful. Now, this slide marks the end of the guide overview. So hopefully that leaves you wanting to know more and convinced that this will be a valuable aid to your work. I mentioned earlier that a training programme is on its way. We are currently working on and will be offering in the spring of 2026 a sustainable trails training programme to accompany the guide. The programme will build on the topics and guidance contained in the guide, but it will dive deeper, it'll go into more detail, it'll draw on real world case studies. It's likely to be a 4-part training course, and it will combine webinars with in-person workshops, including site visits, demos, practical elements and specialist expertise where that's required. But more information will follow on that in the new year. Now, moving on then to question and answers, our question and answer session, and give me time to get a breath now. I'm going to pass over to Gemma, who I know has been monitoring the chat for any questions that have come up, or if anybody has any questions in mind, they can raise their hand. But Gemma and I are going to tag team on this section.
Great, thanks Fiona. Thank you very much for that. That was great. Does anyone have any questions for Fiona after that whistle-stop tour through the guide? It was really informative. Heather has asked, are you able to expand any more on the mobile visitor counting work you have done?
On our visitor counting work that you have done, Heather, I'm not particularly sure what you mean by that. Do you mean what's in the guide or what we are working on as an organisation?
Maybe just what are we?
What's in the guide?
What's the mobile in the guide? Yeah.
Of course, yeah. So in the guide we have included basically an analysis of the different visitor counters. Yeah. So very much focusing in on the quantitative forms. And in there is a really simple table of the application of each of those counters and the costs that are likely to be associated, as well as the advantages and disadvantages. So the likes of, look, which ones work best where there's Wi-Fi or can connect into a cloud system, which ones are better for long range and things like that. And that, Heather, is really based on experience of using various different types of these counters over the years. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Heather. Thanks you for that. We've also just got some messages just saying great presentation and well done on the. I'm looking forward to the details of the guide when delegates are able to view that. So that's great. Thanks, Fiona. David Liddy has asked, do you list potential suppliers in the guide at all?
No, we don't, David. No, not specifically list those in the guide. But listen, there's no reason why we can't cover that off in a training session. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone have any other questions there? Oh, there's a hand up there. Just this one here.
Yes. Yes.
Hi.
Sorry if this has already been covered because I was a couple of minutes late joining. But you mentioned, Fiona, that you had aligned with the system in Southern Ireland and in Scotland as well. So this is aligned with Sport Ireland, the principles you have come up with. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, Eileen. Yes, we really spent a lot of time. That was a really concerted effort to make sure that, you know, where we could and particularly on the specification and grading of trails, that we're adopting the same language, we're adopting the same approach in terms of how that's communicated, but also the specifications and parameters on things like width, accessibility, you know, how many benches are required in all ability trail, accessible trails. So particular types of guidance that Sport Ireland have produced, and the outdoor accessibility guidance from Walking Scotland and the Sensory Trust and Disability Sport NI. So, you know, there was a lot of time spent going back and forward to make sure that what we have in our guide follows naturally on from the original grading information that we had in our 2013 guide, but brought it up to a more modern standard and was aligning with and compatible with that other leading guidance that's out there.
Okay, and anything that you have developed and researched, has that influenced any changes with Sport Ireland, or were you trying to just meet a consistent policy across each of the three bodies?
Yeah, meeting existing guidance that's already out there, Eileen. But in terms of your first question there, has it influenced changed? Who knows what's to come?
Right.
Not up to this point, but who knows what's to come.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Just another quick question there, just in the chat. I'll just come back to you in a wee minute, Mike. Thank you. Just with regards, how do you plan to keep the costing section relevant and up to date as costs fluctuate and increase?
repeat that? Sorry, Gemma.
Sorry, just a quick question with regards costing, and how do we plan to keep the costing section relevant and up to date as costs fluctuate and increase?
Yeah, okay, so that question around the functionality of the guide. So the costing information that's in there, again, very much references what would have been Paths for All, so Walking Scotland now, their path, and that's regularly updated, their path costing guidance. So that's in there. Like, we're working on these projects. We always have live projects, so very much regularly doing market testing and to make sure that the costs that we are costing projects against are current and cautious, that they incorporate everything, but in terms of making sure it's kept up to date. So this guide will not be a printable version, it will be a digital download, and when you go through it, you'll read at the start, it will be updated, and we've made sure that the functionality allows for that, so it's very easy to make changes, to add guidance on, and to update things very quickly as things change in the industry or the sector. So that's how we propose to do that, or plan to do that.
Okay, I'll just take a raised hand. Mike will take you next. Vince will come back to you in a minute, but Mike, do you want to pop on and ask Fiona a question there?
Yeah, I thought I'd get a bit of interaction from it. First of all, can I just say, from my point of view, fantastic to see this come to fruition. It's been a long time in development, as we know, but it is really good. And I was really impressed by just the level of detail that's within it. I guess the question I have is about the grading. It's never black and white, is it? There's quite a grey area between the gradings, and sometimes you'll have a trail that is almost all accessible apart from one small part, or almost all blue and then one piece that you just think it's hard to know, is it quite blue? How are you dealing with that sort of grayness, or have you flagged that up within the document?
Yeah, no, we have. We've covered that off actually, Mike. I mean, what is the right answer? And you referenced there about it's been a long time coming. It's over the minutiae of detail on things like that, the nuances that took the time, making sure what we were putting out was right, and what was right for, like, as an organisation, Outscape can stand over. But you're totally right. Trail grades like ski slopes, there's a spectrum within the grade. You could have a blue green, or a red trail that's closer to a high end blue than it is the next grade up. But really what we've tried to do is make it very clear the distinctions between one grade and the other. Now, I didn't do it in the presentation, but you could have distilled down those tables that have the detail of the specification even further, and there are cut-off points in terms of width and length and things like that. But to touch on your point, look, you might have a trail that's an all-ability trail, but there's one feature or one slope that pushes it out of grade. What we say in the guide is, look, if it's a new trail, it should be designed to fit within the specification. If you're grading an existing trail, it's the real world, and a judgment call is required, and that comes down to the land manager. So we do cover that off, that look, it's okay, the situation arises and will be prevalent, and a judgment call may be required, and it just comes down to what the land manager judges to be the majority of the grade. But more critically is how you communicate that to your user, and again, we cover that in a lot of detail in the guide, but in as simple a way as possible, in that you don't make the decision for somebody what's right for them. You equip them with the information very clearly so that there's no nasty surprises, and they make the decision for themselves. Does that answer that?
Yes, great. Thanks, Fiona. I'll just get back to you now, Vince. Sorry, you've been waiting patiently. Vince is just asking about how this guidance fits in with the community trail guidance, scoping and visibility stages, and are we updating that as well?
Yes, so actually, Vince, you touched on it. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. The Community Trail Toolkit, which is now up on our Outscape website to download as well, it's a simplified version, designed and written specifically intended for community groups. But the process is the same. It's just simplified. So there should be nothing in the Community Trail toolkit that does not align because that information was extracted from the Sustainable Trails Guide, except that the Sustainable Trails Development Guide was essentially published after, just because one was ready sooner, but the two go hand in hand, and one very much is fed from the other.
Great, thank you. Sorry, Fiona, I should have said everyone is commending you on your presentation and the great work has been done here. So every question has the introductory line of that, so well done. So Daryl also says, great presentation, and have you come across any issues with regards planning permissions for new trails? Bit of insight there maybe with regards planning.
Yeah, I think probably that, compared to when the 2013 guide was written versus now, is that, there would have been trails that would have constituted permitted development. So every trail now, we use the default stance that it requires planning permission, and that also includes trails that might be considered upgrade or maintenance. So our default position is that everything. Have we come across trails that are difficult to get through planning? Yes, like every project, but what we find, and again it's communicated in our guide, is that we're quite effective at submitting planning applications, and that is because we front load a lot of the information. We go through a very thorough and comprehensive process of scoping and feasibility to identify what the constraints are and design those out or mitigate against them. And as I say, usually those are environmental. So again, one of our core principles is that, trails should not just do no more harm, but actually now go further, be regenerative, benefit the environment, add value, create, or take the opportunities to enhance. So I think when that's your starting approach, it's a good place to be in, and early engagement with NIA. But yeah, that's what's covered really in the guide, and mixed in with a bit of professional experience there.
Okay, thank you. Just a query then with regards, I guess, terminology, with regards accessibility, Fiona, and why the term all ability was chosen over accessible as a grading.
Honestly, probably a wee bit of nostalgia. It's that all ability, I suppose, is what we had in our 2013 guide. It feels like an Outscape term, and I mean, it does align with the accessibility guidance. So I think probably that's the reason for that it felt logical and natural to continue with that term. But behind that, it is essentially an accessible trail grade. Yeah.
Okay. I keep reading a question, then another one comes in that jumps on. So just a question with regards how the guide is fitting in with organisations like Quilcha and MPWS with regards to their own in-house standards. If any of what they have, how is ours aligning and fitting with those?
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, Aaron, thanks for the question. We didn't drill down to the level of individual bodies or organisations in that way. It would have been too diluted to do that. So what we did do was stick with the governing bodies, the organisations like Sport Ireland, and things like that. Aaron made sure we were compatible with that, as the overall guidance. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, I might just take the last one from, sorry, there's somebody's got their hand up there. Sorry, Vince, I'll come back to you. Oh, sorry, there's you, Vince. Vince, do you want to pop in with an interactive question?
Yeah, I just thought we might get some noise going. That's
yeah.
not ET. Yeah, I was just thinking about your work with ORN and then Mike across with ENOS.
Not so bad.
That's not me.
No. I think that's Hugo Fitzpatrick there. Is the blue line around his screen. Hugo, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be great. Please.
Sure, I'll just lash on. So just thinking of all the other things you've done in the project across the way. But this idea of communicating to the user on what they're looking to expect, whether it's all ability or whether it's easy, difficult, moderate, or big boulder steps or smooth ground. And thinking of some of the things that have happened recently down the south, and like Aaron's done some good stuff with the sugar loaf and trying to get that message across. Like, what sort of best practice are you seeing out there, and is there sort of any thoughts in your head that could start to draw that together into some sort of appendix or guidance document that would work north south as well as across the UK?
Yeah, that's interesting that you asked that, Vincent. Actually, that's a good one. I think, signage and communication is one of the topics that I think has an insatiable demand, to be honest, to know more about and keep having the conversation around. In terms of our work and what practice we follow ourselves, I call it Walk in Scotland. Maybe everybody knows it as Pass for All, but I know it's recently rebranded there this year. But we would follow their guidance again, following the approach of big land managers there across the water, which is very much they have their grading guidance for path managers, and it's a very simple, I suppose, matrix of how to do that. And then I suppose to the user, you're not presenting the detailed specification, which can be alienating and impossible to understand. You're generalizing that. So what we will be doing is eventually providing I suppose a consumer description of each of those grades, that can be used. But in the grading advice from Walking Scotland, they provide some excellent advice in there in terms of like word count and being consistent with the terms, and even if something is described as loose, what that means exactly. So in the time that it took us to produce this guide, again, there was a real spotlight done on, right, we have this grading table. How does that translate to the consumer? And are we using the same terms right down to those individual words? So in terms of guidance that we use and we're promoting in our guide, it's that Walking for All, the Path Manager's Guide to Grading. There's honestly not much else out there, but there doesn't need to be. It's an excellent piece of guidance, and as I say, for years that's what we've used, and it's rolled out on signage, certainly in the north here, and we would recommend it for our projects. Yeah.
Okay. Fiona, do you want to touch on any other questions just before I put anything else to Fiona? Anybody want to get interactive and put their hand up or put something through in the chat? We've had some great questions there, Fiona, haven't we?
Yeah, I really have. Yeah.
Fiona, do you want to touch on if there is any further guidance coming down the line? Will this guide be supplemented by anything else? Is there anything else you want to touch on or highlight with regards to that?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Gemma. Yes, I mentioned in the presentation there that there is a supplementary piece of guidance that we're specifically working on. Look, in-house we're calling it the Eco Annex, exact title to be decided, but it's a specific piece of guidance that really hones in on how to integrate biodiversity into trail projects. It goes further. It basically, the guide, the Sustainable Trail Development Guide, is the main guide, and it touches on everything. This guide is supplementary and really goes specifically into the detail of how to do that and what the guidance is in Northern Ireland, right down into the planning, the process, and I suppose from an approach in planning and designing your trail, how to incorporate biodiversity from the very early stages. So that will be coming soon. It's in development. It's actually finished in draft format. So we're really hoping that will be out soon. And again, because our main guide is digital, we can incorporate a reference and signpost to that, and it'll appear on the Outscape website under resources too. So it is our hope that we develop further future pieces of supplementary guidance on niche or specific topics like that. As I suppose demand or sector needs arise.
Okay, and just I know there's something that you want to speak on with regards to future training, and I think Vince, this might link in with your query there with regards expressions of interest in the training modules and give an idea of timing and costs. Fiona, I think that leads us into talking about the upcoming training program, and that we would like what we want to ask the people on the call here at the minute.
Yeah, so I'd said at the start there, like we are developing a training program. It will build on the guide, but it would go much further and add a lot more value. I am really keen to hear from you, the sector, as to what your training needs are or what you would really like to see covered off in that. Just in case there's anything out there that we haven't thought of, and making sure that we're really satisfying the need and demand of the people working in our sector. Maybe you could pop it in the chat or email me separately after if nothing comes to mind or nobody wants to speak up at the minute. I see Dwayne's hand is up there.
Yeah, sure. Dwayne, do you want to come in there? Oh, I think you're on mute there, Dwayne, at the minute.
Let's see.
You?
Yeah.
Oh.
Not yet.
We did have you.
There we go.
How
There we
about
go.
now?
Yes.
Sorry. Sorry, I missed the question.
I think it may be a bad line.
I'll put it in the
questions. Oh, there you go. You're back now. Maybe put it in the chat, Dwayne. I think every time you go to speak, I get one word, sorry, and then it cuts out again. Yeah, so just while Dwayne's typing, I'll fill. Yeah, just as Fiona said there, if there's anything that people want more information on, if there are gaps in your knowledge or areas that you would like some more information on with regards to the upcoming training program, that would be great. Vince, you've given us some food for thought there. That's great. So if anybody else wants to add that into the chat, that would be really useful for us to help shape that up and coming program.
Yeah, and then I see Vincent there. You've put in, are you looking for expressions of interest? Look, the trait when it's announced, it'll be open to everybody. I'm sure the numbers will be capped, but it'll be open to everyone. Yeah.
Just an interim there.
Question there from David.
Dave, there. You can see that, Gemma. Can you?
Yeah, does the guide touch on visitor safety zones? It absolutely does. Yes, yeah, it's a core principle, Dave, that risk is managed appropriately. So yes, we absolutely do cover that off and recommend on a number of occasions referring to the VSG guidance. Yeah, very much an influence on in the development of this guide. Yeah.
Just reading your question there, Dwayne, thanks. Is there any guidance on the expected number of users that a trail could attract?
No, there's not specific guidance in that, because I don't think it's a case by case basis. I suppose you're asking there about carrying capacity. No, Dwayne, no, we don't put that in, but in the costing section, the table that I had up earlier, the matrix, it does show that, look, your costs associated with the scoping stage, the construction stage, the management and maintenance stage, there is ranges incorporated in there. And they relate to, look, the level of site development or how developed your site is. So if it's more development, requires more management, you're going to have more numbers, the costs are likely to be higher, is essentially the principle. So hopefully that answers that. But no, we don't anywhere state that this type of trail can expect this type of numbers. No.
And there's a couple of questions coming in there, Fiona, just with regards, I know you're going to come on to it, so it just leads us nicely onto the next slide. People asking where they can get a copy of the guide, or they've noticed that's a digital guide, so where can they get a copy? But maybe just before you go into that one, is there guidance, sorry, Josephine has asked, is there guidance on the processes to follow if your trail is in a designated area, i.e. an SSE or an SPA?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I would, Josephine, we do that, but not specifically in a lot of detail, because we just couldn't have covered everything in this main guide. So look out for the ecological annex or that biodiversity supplementary guidance when it comes, because that's exactly what that is for. Yes, so it'll go into that in detail on that. And yes, there's two questions there. Did you say it's a digital guide, and where will it be available? So I think, Gemma, if you're happy, we'll move on then.
I'm happy. Thanks for all your questions, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your kind compliments in the chat box, everybody. Thank you. Yes, okay, so back to the presentation then. So our guide is live now, and it is available as a digital download only from our website. It's actually in 3 places on our website under the resources, featured initiatives, and also the place shaping tab. So it's in there. Get downloading it. Hopefully you find it a really functional, interactive document. With loads of really great stuff. As I said, I don't necessarily recommend you read it from start to finish, but hopefully you find it a really valuable addition and aid to your work. So on the mention of our website, today is actually the day we also launch our newly redesigned website. So everything's the same, except, well, everything's the same in terms of the domain name and the domain location. So if you search for www.outscape-scape.com, you'll go to the same website. The domain hasn't changed, just the look and the functionality. So really hope you enjoy using that. It's faster, it's more intuitive, and it's fully optimized now for mobile and has improved navigation. So hopefully you can benefit from that and see that. And I suppose all that is really left for me to say is thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for contributing. I wish you all the best using the document, and as I said, really hope that it aids your work and it helps you. I'd like to thank the funders again for bringing the guide to the sector. If you have any questions or you need more information, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. The recording and the resources will be shared directly with people on the call, but it's also available for download and will be hosted on the website. And yes, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all in the future at hopefully our training sessions.